Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of It Came From Inside the Long Box. This week we are reeling with the news of the man, Stan Lee's death. And as a tribute, I thought we would do Stan Lee story arcs. Not just any old stories like the ones that are seen widely regarded as some of his most influential work. Yeah, the first thing we want to do is get into it is Spider-Man. Obviously, we all know the history of Spider-Man. I don't want to go too much into that because I think that it'll sort of take away from what the show is about, as you know, just recommending books and talking about why we're recommending the books. We might sort of touch upon that on a different show, as opposed to It Came From Inside the Long Box. So we'll start off. The first one is Amazing Spider-Man number 33. Sorry, I usually do this largely unscripted, but these are books that I haven't read for a long time, so I've got a few notes. The Amazing Spider-Man number 33 from 1966 it's part of the If This Be My Destiny story arc, which is a three-parter. It was 31, 32 and 33. The whole story arc is fantastic, to be honest. It introduced a lot of bit characters that became massive within the title, such as Gwen Stacy and Harry Osborn. But the last issue, issue 33, which is I always forget how the final chapter. They just call it the final chapter. Is a landmark in storytelling. It really is. For anybody that hasn't read it, I recommend you read the whole story arc. But that last issue is so special, and it really highlights why Steve Ditko is revered in the way that he is. The whole story. I mean, I'm not going to sort of too many spoilers because we don't do that on this show. We recommend that you read them for yourselves as opposed to sort of telling you what they're about. But the whole sort of the whole story behind it is just a man who starts off the issue defeated, and I can't really stress the brilliance of this issue of without sort of without giving out too many spoilers, but it's all based around just a moment. The whole issue is based around just a moment of somebody, for lack of a better term, sucking it up and just being the hero and not quitting. It really is genius, and like I said, it's very one of a kind. That's why I'm having such difficulties describing it, is because you really, if you read it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And it was groundbreaking in the way that the artwork helped tell the story. And like I said, it really put, I mean, Steve Ditko was already an amazing, groundbreaking artist, but I think this is one of the issues that really put him on the map. This is why we still talk about it. This issue is widely regarded as one of the greatest comic books ever written. Because of this reason, because of it just capturing a small part, you know, of the story, but making it into something so special. But it really is that good. So you know, that's highly recommended. The old part of the trilogy, If This Be My Destiny, but as the brilliance of the storytelling, it's the last one that I'm sort of focusing on. But the whole thing's fantastic. From there, we're going to go to another Amazing Spider-Man. Again, this is something that I've not read for a long time, so bear with me. Usually I have a little bit of time to sort of brush up, and that's why we make the decision to sort of go ahead and mention them. But unfortunately, this ties in with the death of Stan Lee, so it was kind of, I decided that we should really do an episode where we just look at Stan Lee. I just thought it'd be a nice gesture. Amazing Spider-Man number 50, 1967. Spider-Man No More. This is awesome. This really is. This highlights why Stan Lee was so good at what he did. He introduced the flawed character, the troubled character, and what he and Steve Ditko did in the beginning was really interesting, because they made Spider-Man very vulnerable, very human, very relatable, which hadn't really been done before. And what's interesting is this is like it evolved from that, and this is kind of like a milestone of where it evolved to by issue 50, whereas him and Sal Buscema, I think so, I think Buscema, they come to a point where he'd gone from that kid who sort of discovered that he was powerful, and and that he was doing this to help people, and he was working against his natural inclination to run for the hills when something went down, and he was getting involved. And this came by issue 50. He came to a point where he'd realised that there was a real downside to that he was always putting the people that he loved in harm's way, and it was always sort of coming back to kick him in the backside, if you like. And that despite that, and despite the fact that he kind of lost his appetite for the mantle, he couldn't do that. It had gone full circle, and now he was the person that couldn't run for the hills. He couldn't walk the other way. He felt he'd become somebody who had to do something, and it's basically that position of what to do next, and he decides to give up the mantle because he's just sick of it coming back to haunt him and hurting the people that he loves the most. It's a real interesting story, and it's a really nice continuation, and like I said, it sort of, it kind of took from what happened earlier on in the series, and really evolved with that, and it was really good. It's really cool to see that the whole from great power comes great responsibility, although it's not coined originally by the comic book. It goes way back. When it was used in the live action comic book, it was heavily influenced by this comic book, by issue 50, with the story arc that happens. So it's a really interesting book, and like I said, if you've watched and really like the live action movies in particular, and you're wondering where that comes from, that might be a good place to sort of jump in. Next up, we're going to go with, sorry, I'm just going to bring the notes up because I'm not going to try and hide them, because you can just see that I've got notes. We'll go to Fantastic Four. Fantastic Four number 49 to 50, The Coming of Galactus. This is an epic. It really is, and that's a term that's used way too much, but this really is an epic. It was kind of the first. Yeah, that could be wrong. I'm sure people will tell me. That's fine. It's one of the first big epic galactic wide stories. The blueprint for Infinity Gauntlet, probably the Crisis on Infinity Earths, and other sort of huge, events. And although it's not a cross as such, it's more of an event within just the Fantastic Four. But it did open the gates. It's not just a supervillain who they thwart. I mean, this is Galactus, the coming of Galactus, and many cool things come from that. Obviously, Galactus comes from that, and the aftermath. It was kind of thorn in Jack Kirby and Stan Lee's side, because where do you go from that? Where do you go from the world beater? And they managed to successfully sort of go on from that, which was really inspiring stuff. But this story in particular, like I said, 1966, issues 49 to 50. This was where I was never a huge fan of the Fantastic Four growing up. It was all a bit white picket fence for me, which strangely, as I got older, young punk and all that. As I got older, it became more appealing to me because it became whereas that seemed like the norm when I was a kid, it certainly isn't now, where more and more comic books want to be sort of against type, so they become type kind of thing. And Fantastic Four, I kind of like the fact that it's stayed sort of to a certain degree, picket fence, the first family of comic books, and it's there's a coolness in that. And what's really great about this as well within his writing, particularly on the Fantastic Four, is that Stan really understands the family unit in that way, and the little quarrels between them, particularly between Ben Grimm and Johnny Storm. He understands those little fights and falling out, and the tensions that are the sort of faux tensions that are in the family, which is really cool. But what's really great about that is that he can put that on a backdrop of something that's intergalactic, which is really hard to, which I could imagine is really hard to do, because you're putting something that's very very mundane and very day to day against something that's completely the opposite. And he really excelled at that. He really did really well when it comes to Fantastic Four's adventures in space. And also what came from that was the Silver Surfer, which we'll touch on a little bit later, but it was a fantastic creation by Jack Kirby. But the solo stuff, again, which we'll touch on more later, really was a high point of Stan's career. So that's coming to Galactus, which is 49 issues, 49 to issues 50 of Fantastic Four, 1966, and it really is sort of, like I said, it's the first. I think it's probably the first foray into the all is lost kind of story arc within comic books. I mean, you could argue that every issue of every comic book is that, but this was really cool. I mean, you read story arcs where it's like, how are they? There's no way. Kind of like if anybody's sort of watched the last Avengers movie, the Infinity Infinity Crisis, or whatever they call it. But again, which is actually a highly, a massive inspiration. The first Galactus saga was a massive inspiration on all these stories that came afterwards. But if you've seen that and you sort of get to the end when they, again, no spoilers, but the ending within the Infinity Gauntlet Crisis, is it? I can't remember what they called it. I watch the movies, I like the movies, but I don't pay as much attention to them as I do with the comics. So, but yeah, that feeling that you're left with, kind of like, how can this happen? How can this sort of be, how can they, come back from this? This is kind of like one of the first comic books that kind of did that. It was a massive event. So yeah, well worth the read, and a real high point of Stan's writing career. We got next is Fantastic Four 51, which is just after This Man, This Monster, which again touches on the mundane aspect of. He'd always done this fantastic job of painting the picture of his characters in a very realistic and relatable way. A lot of people say he's one of the first that did that. I'd say he's the first writer that consistently did that. That he put a bit of himself and a bit of his readers into many of his creations and our vulnerabilities and weaknesses, and why this is such a good story. And I really like this because it's a really cool story. Ben Grimm, and Ben Grimm's one of those characters that really benefited from that sort of Stan Lee sensibility of the weak, of the troubled hero, and with his personal life and sort of losing so much and being stuck as this monster. And again, we try not to sort of too many spoilers, and we encourage you to read it for yourself. But We'll start off, you know, we'll give you a little bit. He's kind of he's taken from him, and he's human again. And there's that juxtaposition between the delight of being Ben Grimm again and having the opportunity of a normal life again, which he hasn't had. And anybody who's read any sort of Fantastic Four at all, not just the old stuff, but and knows that there is that part of Ben Grimm that just wants to be Ben Grimm again. And I think even in the movies, even the terrible last one, and you know, I don't think I'm alone in saying that. I think we all know that the last Fantastic Four movie was terrible. But you know, there's always been this ongoing sort of thing where we know Ben Grimm's not like the others. He's not. His power's not invisible. He can't just hide it and then turn it on when he needs it. You know, he's this big sort of, you know, some might say grotesque creature, and he has to live with that day in and day out. And what Stan Lee did so brilliantly was portray that, you know, and not just by making him a big orange rock monster that sulks a lot, but by really humanising how he felt about that. And we're saying again, you know, I've heard naysayers talk about the simplicity and corniness of the early writing, but you know, it was a different target demographic then. You know, and Stan Lee was somebody who was essentially writing stories for kids. And when you put that into, when you really think about that, when you really think about the fact that he wasn't really writing them for you and me at our ages, or I don't know how old you are, but I'm guessing that you're probably, you know, probably not a child. So he wasn't writing those stories for you. So the fact that it reflects on you, I think that the sort of the oldest they thought that they were sort of getting through to was just pre-teen. So the fact that he wasn't talking down to you, and that he was, you know, is something quite remarkable. And the fact that he was putting, you know, these insecurities into, you know, in showing these fully grown, you know, men and women having these insecurities was relatable to kids, but not only kids. I'm not sure whether he knew. I think he knew that. I think he knew that it appealed to him as a writer, and that's, you know, and so that's how he sort of went about it. But anyway, yeah, This Man, This Monster, and again, I don't want to ruin too much, because we try and encourage that you read it yourself, because that's the point. Really, to enjoy, you know, we would recommend, so that you can enjoy these fantastic works, you know. But yeah, it's this juxtaposition between stuck. Does he continue to, you know, to be just Ben Grimm for the first time in however long, and enjoy his life, or does he sort of, because it's kind of a ploy, again, I don't want to ruin too much, it's kind of a ploy, and somebody else is posing as the thing, and there's a danger to the others as a usurper. So does he do that, or does he run back to the Fantastic Four and become the Thing again? And it's quite poignant, and I think that's something that poignant is something that Stan Lee did quite well, you know, regardless of how you view the dialogue in his early comics or whatever. There is a poignancy in his vulnerability. And yeah, so a big fan of This Man, This Monster. Couldn't recommend it enough. It's fantastic. We also have the Silver Surfer. Yeah, so the Silver Surfer, the solo series. Very, very. Now I got a couple of. I know a couple of people in particular who will be nodding their head if they watch the video, because I know how they feel about Stan Lee's sort of run on the first solo miniseries. The Silver Surfer was created by Jack Kirby and introduced within the Galactus saga, which we mentioned before. The Coming of Galactus, sorry, which we mentioned before. But he became, he was a real interesting character, because he was this reluctant herald of Galactus. He was this destructive force, and I think there's sort of this kind of, you know, when you watch, if you've ever watched a documentary about the First World War and the reluctancy of these people that are doing their duty, because they felt that they had to, for honour and duty, as opposed to because they believed in the war. They were doing it because they were noble and they were heroic, which ties in because it's actually just gone Remembrance Sunday. But yeah, it was kind of that poetic reluctancy of doing this duty that he was charged with. But it's really interesting, and the solo series was done a bit after he had a few appearances within the Fantastic Four, and it deals with his exile to Earth and his observations of humans and how he feels about that. And although he was trapped within this role of what he was doing with Galactus, how he sees humans as a species, and you know how chaotic and warlike we are in a way. But yeah, it's a fantastic series, and it's really quite daring and quite clever, and it's very, very thoughtful, and again a very high recommendation on the Silver Surfer. But it's also quite thought-provoking, and it was one of the occasions where Stan just kind of went with the flow, and you'll see in some of his work with Fantastic Four, he was really on top of his game when it came to the sort of intergalactic stuff, because he just kind of let go a little bit, and he was quite introspective in that way with like how he feels, and you know, again, like he kind of did with his insecurities within the, you know, his personal insecurities brought out in the superheroes. Well, there was kind of that bigger sort of introspective look when it came to his galactic stuff. Well, that's the way I sort of think of it anyway, and so I'm a big fan of that. So yeah, I mean, most of his, I mean, you probably noticed that most of the stuff is around, you know, between 66 to 68 is kind of most of the stuff is. But this is a guy that I mean, although he continued to work within comics and he continued to write, he was, I should imagine he was pretty burnt out over that period of time, because he was writing a lot, and he was really trying to get stuff over. But that's just a little collection. I mean, feel free to chime in, and again on our Facebook, it's still under the Atomic Comics Fallout Zone page. But if you have a look on that, if you go on that, feel free to comment and debate and to put ideas and arcs forward. But yeah, because there's lots that I would have missed, and we don't have enough time, unfortunately, with the videos yet. We're trying to keep them a bit shorter to try and encourage people. Maybe if we get a steady viewership, then we'll start to think about making them a little bit longer. But yeah, so those are the picks so far. So that's again, Amazing Spider-Man 51, which is no, it's not. That's Fantastic Four 51 from 1966, which is This Man, This Monster. The three issues that precede it, issue 49 to issue 50 in 1966, which is the coming of Galactus. Amazing Spider-Man number 50, which is one of my personal favourites. The Spider-Man No More, again, so good. 1967, and Amazing Spider-Man 33 with 1966. Again, that is one that has to be read to really understand. And well, as part of the trilogy, the If This Be My Destiny story arc, which was 31 to 33, and 33 is a really special treat for the end of that trilogy. It's fantastic. But yeah, I mean, like I said, there's lots and lots more. Stan Lee was very prolific, so there's lots more. But that's our little take for the moment on this short video. If you want to recommend, have your 2 pence worth, feel free to add on the comments below. But also, if you would like to, we have a Facebook page. We're going to work out on some other stuff as well, and pretty soon We're going to have a podcast coming with other shows, and we want to do some other shows on YouTube as well. So not just the LONGBOX, but also sort of get into other stuff that's, you know, similar target demographic. So, for example, TV, film, anime, that kind of thing, collectibles even, and we can continue with that. So that's our show for now, and we'll put up another one this time next week. Again, if there's anything you want to put forward, if there's anything you want us to go into, if there's anything you want to say, if there's anything you want to chime in, again, try and keep it civil, because we'll just pay no attention to people who are just going to send insults. But yeah, any debate at all, just put it on, and we'll add it into the show. Thank you very much. I'll see you next week.